And we wrap up the trip on day 76, leaving Grand Teton National Park. And this last segment is only about 1,450 miles that takes us from Grand Tetons back to home. So starting Grand Tetons on day 76 and go about an hour up to Old Faithful and Yellowstone National Park. We'll spend the whole day there. It's obviously a big park, so even though it's a relatively short trip, day 76 will be spent in a couple hour drive and then really bebopping around the park, especially hitting Old Faithful. And then following that, the next day takes us up to Montana and the Bighorn National Battlefield Visitor Center. And that will get us an opportunity to, or Big Hole, National Battlefield Visitor Center. That's one of the battlefields from the wars against the Native Americans back in the late 1800s. So we'll go check that out, spend some time in Montana. It's about 4.5 hour drive from Yellowstone. So we'll get there day 77. Day 78 will see us up at Glacier National Park. That's about another 4.5 to 5 hour drive from Big Hole to Glacier. Glacier's a phenomenal park. We spent a little bit of time there last year. Alex and I, when we did the big road trip cross country, and so this is a good time to go back and revisit Glacier. Should be relatively short, like I said, a relatively short 5 hour trip. So that gets us there on day 78, 75, 76, 77, 78, and then day 79 will see us go through Idaho, about 6.5 hour drive from Glacier over to the Nez Perce National Historical Park. And one of the challenges as you kind of look at this trip coming out of Glacier is it's not that long from a distance, only about 340 miles. But the roads are such and the terrain is such that it's going to take about 6 hours to get to cover that amount of time. So we'll go hit Nez Perce National Historic Park right off the reservation, just off the Washington border, and that will be our Idaho stop. And then I broke up the trip back into a couple chunks. So the first chunk is going from the Nez Perce National Historical Park to the Manhattan Project National Historical Park in Hanford, Washington. So it's a site that's currently being cleaned up for radiation and other kind of downstream impacts of nuclearization of the energy program. But would like to stop and see Hanford. So we'll make a trip there. It's about 3 hours from the Nez Perce Reservation here over to the Manhattan Project. So we'll take a day to do that trip and get some of that in. And then the next day is actually a fairly long drive from Hanford over to Olympic National Park. Probably about 6 hours again. Takes us all the way across Washington to the last national park in Washington the last national park that we're going to be visiting, which is Olympic National Park Visitor Center, which is here on the Olympic Peninsula. It's a huge national park. Tends to be very busy in the summer. The visitor center is actually in Port Angeles, Washington, but the park takes up the bulk of the Olympic Peninsula. Between the park and the national forest, so we'll spend a little bit of time out there. I've never been out there, even though it's really in my backyard at this point. So I'll spend a day out there, and then it's about a 2 hour drive, including a ferry ride here from Port Townsend back home to Anacortes. So that takes us, from essentially day 75, 76, 77. So we'll be here on day 76, here on day 77, here on day 78, here on day 79, day 80, day 81, and then day 82. So I'm anticipating, give myself a couple days of grace here. I'm anticipating it's day 82 is when we would be arriving home, but probably closer to day 85 to just give myself a couple extra days just in case. So this kind of wraps up the initial planning section and the initial here's what I'm looking at from a initial route planning. Have a choice to make. Was originally going to be taking the blue Jeep, and I've done a video on the blue Jeep, but it's actually the way it's owned, and it's owned by a company, and the insurance on that doesn't permit that type of use. So the alternatives are I can buy the Jeep out from the company and use it. I can use my red Jeep, which is owned by me, or I've got a 1982 Mercedes 300 SD that I know would be able to, well, I don't know if it would be able to make the trip, but there's no terrain here that it would be, that I need four-wheel drive for, especially in the summer. So I'm debating whether to take the 1982 Mercedes diesel sedan or the 2004 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's a two-wheel drive. And so we'll be giving a little bit of thought to that, and if you have any suggestions, just comment them below, and we will do a video on that decision here shortly. I've got to do some test fitting and other things, because most of what I've got was designed to go in the blue Jeep, and the red Jeep will be fine. Although I'm leaning toward taking the Mercedes just because I think that would be truly epic, to be trying to do this 18,000 mile road trip in a car that is 45 years old. So we'll kind of figure this out as we go, but appreciate you watching to this point, and look forward to some of the next steps, which is going to be getting one of those two vehicles ready to go and going through what we're going to be taking with us, and then getting the road trip underway.